Hey guys, how's it going? Jarred-Garneau here. Here's my weekly YouTube lesson. So for those of you that are new to the channel, please subscribe, like, comment, all of those things. Really helps out my channels, especially since I'm still trying to grow my audience. And yeah, thank you for tuning in. So today, I'm just gonna give like a general tip video on slide guitar. I get a decent amount of comments about, you know, for those of you that are beginning slide guitarists. So I'm just gonna think of some stuff off the top of my head that I think are good general tips. But one thing is just to treat it like it's a new instrument. So unlike regular standard guitar, where you have frets that are like clear markers for the change of pitches, which is like, obviously how you get around on standard guitar. Slide guitar is a much different animal because the pitches don't really, the frets don't really mean anything besides being a visual guide, because you have like all these like infinite notes in between, and really it's a much more fluid instrument than standard guitar. Standard guitar can sound rather rigid, which, that's part of the sound, especially back in the early days when Charlie Christian was playing. Like, his lines are very just like syncopated and very rhythmic, where playing slides more akin to being like a vocalist, for instance. So a good place to start is always by listening to like instruments that resemble a slide or have some similar characteristics. So vocalists, some horns, like a trombone I've heard is a good comparison, a harmonica, to Indian classical instruments like the sarod and sitar, and numerous others. But the idea is that you're learning a more fluid or vocal instrument than guitar, which really started out as a rhythmic percussive instrument. It was meant to accompany like a lead instrument, like a voice or a horn or something, just like stuff like that. Back in the early days of jazz, that a lot of it was just like playing chords on the right beats and just like being kind of part of the rhythm section with the drum and bass. So yeah, just really changing your mindset on what the slide actually enables you to do. The other thing is, playing with a light touch. There's like, yes, it's beneficial to play with an all slide guitar where the strings are like jacked up way high above the neck. But for me, if you listen to like some of my favorite guitarists like Dwayne and Derek, those guys, well, Derek at least, admits that his slide is like, or his action's fairly low for playing slide. And that's because he's developed a light touch, which I think is really important to develop out of the gate. And then with Dwayne, I think I even read in one of the books I have about the Allman Brothers that he used nines on his Les Paul, and he used, the Les Paul for both his slide and standard playing for a while until he, got that SG from Dickie Betts, I believe, which he then used as all slide guitar. But a lot of his like more famous slide lines you hear on Les Paul, and if you play with like nines, that's a pretty light touch right there. Where Derek, plays with a mix pack of starting with it's basically a pack of like standard like 10 gauge strings, but he has an 11 and I think a 14 on the second string typically. For me, I just use all 11s for my strings. I use DR Pure Blues, the 11 pack. And I think I get like, pretty fluid lines with standard guitar, even though it's a slightly heavier pack than Derek uses. But, I was just kind of like tired of like mixing packs and spending essentially twice as much on strings. So maybe I could look into like a different distributor or a different brand of strings. But regardless, I think just playing with a light touch is very beneficial. Because, you know, I'm not even sure how high my strings are off my neck, but it's still fairly low. Like I can still play lead lines just fine, you know. So yeah, just developing a light touch out of the gate. Another thing I think is super helpful is just not only playing with the light touch with the left hand, but with the right hand as well. With slide, you're more likely to fret out than with just like standard guitar. So it's important just to make sure you, especially if you're switching between slide and standard guitar on the same song, just to adjust your touch accordingly. You could probably get away with digging in a little bit more when you're just playing standard guitar versus slide. So playing with a light right hand touch is important. Another thing is just definitely starting with the basics. You know, if you try and hit the ground running with like Derek and Dwayne, you know, that you're going to be able to do it if you're persistent enough. But, you know, it's generally better to start with, you know, something easier, like maybe some Elmore James songs where a lot of those songs are only like 2.5 minutes to begin with. So the slide solos usually last only like one chorus, maybe two. So those solos are really good to learn from, and just like they're just super basic, super iconic licks, and you could definitely benefit from getting to know them. And, you know, just knowing the history of slide guitar as a whole, you know, going back, not only listening to Elmore James, but even as guys that like influenced him. So like Charlie Patton, Booker White, Robert Johnson. Muddy Waters is more of like, I think Elmore is contemporary, but listen to him as well, you know, diversify like the slide players you listen to and just learn the history behind everything. Because the more you listen to this type of music, like, you know, Delta blues and onward, and even if you include some of the Hawaiian sounding stuff, it all comes from the same place ultimately. You know, you're gonna like find where the well ultimately draws from, you know. So just really tapping in and just being like a music historian can also be really beneficial. Maybe just before we end today, I'll give you some like, those were kind of like almost more like philosophical tips or something like that, more like concepts. But something you can apply maybe on the fretboard is just like sticking with the same slide, whether it's like acoustic or electric, you know, for the, like, I'll use like stainless or steel or chrome or brass slides, but generally I stick with this ball right here, you know, one, because I'm obviously a fan of the Allman Brothers and Derek and everything, but I just truly like the tone and sound of it. You know, I just think the glass sounds nice tonal wise. Like I definitely think it rings nice and clear. I use the Dunlop Corsedon heavy wall bottle. Ring size is obviously up to you know what size your fingers are, but I use like I think the smallest one possible. I have pretty thin fingers, but yeah, so I like this tone of the heavy wall versus the thick wall better. Just definitely sounds a little bit thicker. And yeah, just some other things is just making sure you're really conscious pitch wise. So you know, bring it back to the frets, you know, if you want to be in tune while you're playing, is you want the center of the slide to be directly over the center of the actual fret wire, the fret right here or wherever on the guitar. So just imagine you're drawing center line through the fret right there. And also making sure you're straight, so you don't want to be angled this way or that way. You want to be relatively straight. And just being in pitch is just like so important. True, you know, there are some awesome slide solos and lines where the soloist is like kind of has like a reckless abandon feel. Like Elmore James stuff, you know, he kind of lets it fly a little bit more, but for the most part, you want to be like in tune and just be really conscious of your intonation and just making sure it's spot on. I mean, even Elmore James stuff, you know, like where I'm saying he's kind of being more reckless is like with his right hand, just letting it fly. You know, just letting it fly with the right hand more, but still pitch-wise, he's still spot on. But yeah, so anyways, guys, let me know what you think of the video. Definitely would love to talk more about this sort of thing, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Getting all tongue-tied here. And I will see you guys next week. All right.